The courtroom was quiet, filled with tension that seemed to hang in the air like a heavy fog. The judge sat high on the bench, his eyes cold and sharp as he looked down at the woman standing before him. Sarah, just an ordinary mom to most, was fighting for something no parent should ever have to fight: for the right to keep her child. Her hands trembled slightly as she faced the judge, hoping for a fair chance, but deep inside, fear gnawed at her. The room was packed with people: lawyers, family members, strangers, all watching closely. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was firm and unforgiving. "I find you unfit to care for your child," he declared. The words echoed like a thunderclap, shocking everyone present. A silence followed, heavy and thick, as if the air itself was holding its breath. No one said a word, but the looks exchanged around the room spoke volumes. Some were shocked, others nodded quietly, judgment clear in their eyes. Sarah's heart sank. The label "unfit mother" wasn't just an official decision, it was a crushing weight that felt like it would break her. She felt misunderstood, painted with a brush far too broad and cruel. But beneath the surface, beneath the judge's verdict and the courtroom's cold stare, there was a story no one knew. A story of strength, sacrifice, and a past that could change everything. Before Sarah became a mother, before she walked into that courtroom, she had lived a life that few could understand. She was a soldier, not just any soldier, but one who had served with honor and courage in the military for years. The same hands now trembling in the courtroom had once held weapons and saved lives. Sarah joined the military when she was barely out of high school. It wasn't an easy choice. She knew the world she was stepping into was tough, especially for a woman. The barracks were filled mostly with men, and she often had to work twice as hard just to be taken seriously. There were long days filled with grueling training, harsh commands, and constant tests of strength and will, but Sarah never gave up. She learned discipline like a second nature, waking up before dawn, running endless drills, and pushing through pain others might have thought impossible. Her courage was tested many times in the field. She faced dangers that most people couldn't imagine: explosions, gunfire, long nights on guard duty. Yet she stood strong, protecting her fellow soldiers as if they were her family. Sarah wasn't just following orders, she believed deeply in what she was doing. Serving her country wasn't just a job, it was a promise to protect others, to be loyal, and to fight for something bigger than herself. Despite the challenges she faced as a woman in a world that often doubted her, Sarah earned respect. Her commanding officers praised her for her bravery and leadership. She received medals and commendations for missions where her quick thinking saved lives. But those honors never made her prouder than the moments when she helped a scared recruit or stood guard to keep her team safe. The lessons Sarah learned in the military didn't leave her when she hung up her uniform, they shaped her in ways the court couldn't see. Resilience, never giving up no matter how hard life got. Loyalty, standing by those she loved and protecting them fiercely. Strength, not just physical, but emotional and mental. And yet here she was, judged harshly by strangers who only saw her through a narrow lens. The woman they called unfit was the very same woman who had carried the weight of a nation's safety on her shoulders. The contrast was sharp and painful, but Sarah held on to her truth, even when no one else seemed to believe it. The custody battle wasn't easy for Sarah. From the start, the court questioned her every move. The judge and the opposing lawyer seemed quick to point fingers, as if they already had their minds made up before hearing her side. Their voices carried a cold edge, often dismissing her military background, like it was a weakness instead of a strength. "She's too strict," the lawyer argued one day. "Her discipline is harsh, that's not how a mother should treat her child." The words stung. What Sarah had learned in the military, structure, rules, respect, were now being used against her. Being a soldier didn't seem to count for much in the eyes of the court. The judge's tone often felt heavy with bias. Whenever her military service came up, he seemed to brush it aside, as if a woman who carried a gun and followed orders couldn't possibly be a caring mom. Sometimes he would glance at her with a look that said, "This isn't your place." Details of Sarah's life were twisted and misunderstood. The nights she came home late from work were seen as neglect. The times she insisted on strict bedtimes and homework routines were called overbearing. But what the court didn't see was the struggle Sarah faced adjusting to civilian life. After years in the military, it wasn't easy to switch gears. She dealt with nightmares, moments of anxiety, and the pressure of providing for her child alone. She fought quietly, trying to prove herself every day. But the silence around her made the battle lonelier. No one seemed to understand what it meant to be both a mother and a veteran, to carry scars that no one could see. The courtroom wasn't just judging her, it was judging everything she was. Adding to the tension was the presence of the child's father, Michael. Their relationship had been rocky, filled with fights and misunderstandings. He pushed hard for full custody, painting Sarah as unstable and too strict. His family too watched closely, their eyes filled with doubt. They believed a normal mother should look different, so different from Sarah the soldier. The courtroom felt like a battlefield, but this time Sarah didn't have her uniform or her team. She stood alone, fighting not only for her child, but against the harsh judgment of those who didn't see the whole story. And as the hearings dragged on, the weight of their doubt threatened to crush her spirit. As the custody battle wore on, Sarah's attorney kept digging. It was clear the court was leaning against her, but he refused to give up. Then, just when things seemed darkest, he found something no one expected: Sarah's full military record. The moment he placed the thick folder on the judge's desk, a hush fell over the courtroom. All eyes shifted to the stack of papers, the weight of what they might contain growing heavier with each passing second. Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. The record was more than just a list of dates and assignments. It told a story of bravery, sacrifice, and leadership. There were pages filled with medals awarded for courage under fire, for saving lives during dangerous missions, for going above and beyond what was asked. Officers had written glowing recommendations, praising Sarah's calm under pressure and her unwavering dedication. One section stood out. It described how Sarah had mentored younger women soldiers, guiding them through tough challenges and protecting them from harm. It told of a mission where she led her unit through a hostile area, making split-second decisions that saved everyone's lives. These weren't just achievements, they were proof of a woman who had faced danger head-on and come through stronger. As the judge flipped through the pages, his expression slowly changed. The stern, almost cold demeanor softened into something like surprise, then discomfort. He glanced up at Sarah, as if seeing her for the first time, not just a struggling mother, but a decorated veteran with a story of courage he hadn't known. The courtroom began to murmur quietly, the tension thick but shifting. Some people exchanged looks of disbelief, others nodded slowly, as if realizing they had judged too quickly. Sarah felt the weight of those eyes on her, some filled with respect now, others still unsure. Her heart raced, caught between hope and fear. Could this be the moment things would change? Could the truth finally be heard? She swallowed hard, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The fight she had carried inside for so long suddenly felt a little less lonely. The judge cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "This record paints a very different picture than what I had before me," he said carefully. His voice lost some of its sharp edge, replaced by a tone that carried a hint of apology. The room stayed silent, waiting. For the first time since this battle began, Sarah saw a flicker of fairness in the judge's eyes. The evidence was undeniable. Her past was not something to dismiss or fear, it was something to honor. The hidden truths of her life, once buried beneath assumptions and stereotypes, were finally coming to light. And with that, a new chapter in her fight for justice had just begun. The judge took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Sarah's with a mix of regret and honesty. "I must admit," he began slowly, "I underestimated you. I judged you by ideas of motherhood that are traditional. I did not consider what your service and sacrifices might mean." His words hung in the air, heavy but truthful. He went on to acknowledge the strength it took to serve in the military, and the sacrifices Sarah had made, not just for her country but for her child. "Your dedication, your courage, your loyalty, these are qualities any parent should be proud to have." Sarah's eyes filled with a fragile hope, like a small light flickering after a long night. For a moment she allowed herself to believe justice might finally be within reach, but deep down, a shadow of wariness stayed. She had been judged unfairly once before, could she trust that this time would be different? The change in the judge's attitude didn't sit well with everyone. Murmurs rose from some corners of the courtroom. The opposing counsel shot a cold glance, their words sharp as ever. "Respectfully, Your Honor," the lawyer said, "this sudden shift seems out of step with the facts." We cannot ignore the realities of parenting. Some family members of the child's father whispered among themselves, their faces tight with disapproval. The courtroom, once silent, now buzzed with quiet resistance. It became clear Sarah was not only fighting for custody but also against deeply rooted beliefs about what a mother should be: quiet, gentle, and free from the hardships Sarah had faced. This was a new kind of battle, one where Sarah had to prove not just her love and care for her child, but also break the walls built by stereotypes about women who serve in the military. She wasn't just a mother, she was a soldier, a protector, a woman who had lived through challenges most would never understand. And now she had to show that strength and sacrifice could go hand in hand with kindness and motherhood. The fight wasn't over, it was only just beginning. After hours of tense waiting, the judge finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. Based on the full evidence, including your service and commitment, I am granting you custody of your child. For a moment the room seemed to hold its breath, then a quiet wave of relief swept through Sarah. Tears welled up in her eyes, silent, soft tears that spoke of years of struggle, fear, and hope. It wasn't just joy, it was exhaustion from fighting so hard and the cautious optimism of knowing the battle wasn't easy, but at least this chapter had turned in her favor. She blinked back the tears, feeling the weight of the moment settle deep in her chest. Later, as she held her child close, a quiet promise formed in her heart. She would protect this little life with every bit of strength she had, just like she had protected her country. The lessons from her military days now fueled a new kind of mission, one filled with love, patience, and fierce determination. Sarah's story wasn't just about winning custody, it was about breaking through the unfair judgments that had tried to define her. It was about showing the world that strength comes in many forms, and that a woman can be both a warrior and a mother without apology. In the end, Sarah's fight was a reminder resilience is born in the hardest battles, and courage shines brightest when it challenges the unfair and the unseen. Too often, society judges women harshly, especially when they don't fit the usual mold of what a mother should be. Women like Sarah, who serve their country and face challenges few understand, are too easily misunderstood and unfairly judged. But every person has a full story, one that deserves to be seen before we decide their worth. It's important to remember that behind every struggle, there are sacrifices made quietly, and courage shown in ways we might never notice. Before jumping to conclusions, we should take a moment to look deeper, to listen, and to honor those unseen battles. Sarah's story reminds us that change is possible. When we challenge our biases and open our hearts to justice, we can create a world where strength and compassion live side by side. And in that world, everyone deserves a fair chance.